Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to hear from retired UMass Dartmouth professor John Twomey about his experiences creating a land for all seasons and living sustainably off the grid in rural Maine. We want to thank the Marion Institute, UMass Dartmouth English and Communication Department, and UMass Dartmouth Foreign Language and Literature Department, as well as the UMass Dartmouth Sustainability Studies minor program for co-sponsoring this program along with our office. We're grateful to our recently retired professor, Jerry Blightfield, for conceiving of and originating this event. Jerry served for several years as the director of the Sustainability minor and included environmental communications as a core element of his teaching throughout his decades of teaching with us. A special thank you to John Twomey for sharing your time and your insights with us tonight. One story embodies the maximum of living simply so that others may simply live at the core of sustainable principles. And he shows us that individuals can make change happen. Not everyone may start a farm life, but we hope that some of the examples John shares tonight inspire each of us to live at least a little closer to the land. At this point, I'd like to turn the program over to Jerry Blightfield, who'll talk a little bit more about the format for this evening and officially introduce our speaker. Again, on behalf of University of Massachusetts Dartmouth and the Campus Sustainability Department, I hope that all of you enjoy this evening. We welcome you, and here's to you, Jerry.
My name is Jerry Blightfield. I am recently retired from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, where I was in the English and now English and Communication Department. And a quick note on how this came to be. Last semester, I was teaching a course on American environmental writing, and a number of our readings, all of which came out of Bill McKibben's edited volume, American Earth. A number of our readings addressed matters of farming, whether it be Wendell Berry or whether it be issues of pesticide use and whatnot. And since John Twomey's retired, he has occasionally sent photos to a select list of email recipients, photos of his life on the farm and what he is able to grow there, and he is able to grow there. And I thought that it would be really interesting to have John as a guest in our Zoom life for this American environmental writing class. And so I invited him along, and it became clear that John has much more to tell us about life on the Maine farm than could be captured within a 50-minute session. So he and I discussed perhaps doing something of a broader nature, of a bigger scope, and here it is. And as a result of having spoken with Ben about this, Ben said, you know, there are a lot of people in the South Coast who are really interested in farming too, CMAP people and people associated with the Marion Institute. So he said, why don't we open this up to the South Coast? And so here is where we are right now. So that's a little bit about me. Ben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get on to John.
Great, and I'm Ben Jones. I work in advancement at the university, and Jerry Blightfield was one of my favorite professors when I was doing my master's in professional writing and communications, which is one of our fantastic master's programs here. And I actually met John when he presented his book in person in the Stoico First Fed Grand Reading Room, and was so inspired by it, and so hoped to inspire my wife by it that I bought a copy for her in hopes that we could start thinking about that for our own retirement. But I'm just delighted to be able to help put this together. Delighted that all of you have joined us, and I'm going to turn this back over to Jerry.
Before we get to John, Twomey, just let me tell you, share with you the structure of this webinar. So we are going to have John give us about himself, how he got to the farm. Then we're going to show you about a 5-minute slideshow, 64 slides of many of which, well, all of which are photos that John and Lee took many of which had come across via email over the past few years. So this is a kind of, not only is it a beautiful look at the farm, it's this somewhat chronological as well. Following that, we're going to have a discussion. John and I are going to have a discussion for about 15 minutes, which time we invite any of you to submit a question to the Q&A session. The chat has been disabled, so that won't work, but you can send a question to the Q&A section there, which Ben Jones will be monitoring. At the end of the first block of questions and answers, not questions, I don't want to get confusing there. At the first block of discussion between John and myself, then we're going to turn it over to Ben, who is going to some of the questions that John can then answer specifically to you participants. Following that, we'll give that about 10 minutes or so. Following that, Ben will then ask John some questions of his own and monitor the Q&A session during that. And then following that, then I will come back with some more questions for John. And we'll see how it goes from there. We've got until 7 o'clock, which is now an hour and 20 minutes. So we'll play that last section there by ear. Anyway, John, why don't you go ahead and just give us a kind of a brief introduction to yourself and how this all came to be.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jerry and Ben. I want to say right off the bat that Jerry and Ben have done an incredible amount of work to make this possible, to bring this all together. There's a lot of heavy lifting in the overall process, and these two gentlemen were just amazingly dedicated and had a lot of talent and really have worked the thing up nicely. I also want to thank, of course, UMass Dartmouth for hosting the webinar, the Marion Institute, the Sustainability Program, the English and Communication Majors, FLL, and of course, Jamie Jacquard as well for his kind words at the beginning. All of those organizations are doing great work in the Southeast Coast and beyond, and we appreciate their support for this. I thought I might say a few words about my early life and how I got into the idea of doing farming full time. Just to give you a sense of who I am as a person and a little bit about my background. I grew up in a very rural area in northwestern Connecticut and in western Massachusetts. I lived on a small farm, and all of my neighbors, or the lion's share of my neighbors, were farmers as well. And over the years of my childhood and teenage years, I witnessed lots of changes in those areas. A number of farms were lost to development of one form or another. And I found that disturbing because in many instances, I knew these farmers well. As it turns out, both of the farms that were immediately across the street from my childhood, two of my childhood homes, were in fact sold off and developed. So that left a bit of a scar on me. So I had developed the idea of, on the long run, owning and protecting an old New England farm. In addition to that, I didn't have kids at that point, but I thought to myself, should I have children or grandchildren someday, I'd like for them to be able to experience real rural life, the old New England style life. And so I put together the plan to ultimately purchase an old New England farm, restore it, and maintain it. Of course, I had no inheritance. I had no promise of any inheritance. So I had to consider how I would make a living and how I would acquire the funds to be able to realize this project. I had the very good fortune after I finished my graduate work of being hired at UMass Dartmouth in the Department of Foreign Literature and Languages. And I must say that the career there, the teaching learning process, was a real gift to me. It was an incredibly satisfying career. And just a happy day in every regard. I've oftentimes said to others that never one day did I say to myself, gosh, I've got to go in and teach those kids. Every single day, it was a happy experience for me to do. And I look back on that all very fondly. Now, to speed things up a bit, I was quite frugal as a young man, saved a great deal of money so that I'd be able to purchase a farm. I set about searching for a farm in the summers because I had the summer vacations. And I visited Western Mass, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Quebec, Nova Scotia, looking for a place that would meet my needs and strike me as beautiful and interesting. I encountered that place after about 3 years of search when I came down a long dirt road, a 1.5 mile long dead-end dirt road to where I now live, which was the home of the Howard family. We still call it the Howard Place. The Howards had built this old farm in 1864, and they lived here and raised their daughter here during that whole period. They had been on the farm and completely self-sufficient and maintained the buildings in wonderful, rather good shape. I mean, there was a lot of work to be done, but the bones of the old buildings were great, and the fields had been kept open, although they'd grown over a bit. So there was a lot of restoration work to do, but I could see that the place had what I needed. It had the old farmhouse and an attached barn, which was very attractive to me, the old New England style. And it had 150 acres that ran from the top of what is called Hogback Mountain to the bog below. So I knew from that there would be a great deal of diversity of wildlife habitat. Wildlife to me matters a great deal. When I was a kid, living in a fairly rural area, I spent an awful lot of time alone out in the woods and with my small flock of chickens. Seeing that the land offered great habitat for wildlife, I assumed there would be a lot of wildlife there, and that I would be able to work on that over the many years to improve it and make it more attractive to wild creatures. So summers and weekends, we came up and spent time here and worked on a variety of things and had a lot of fun in the process. In the year 2007, 2008, I set about a plan to restore the old farmhouse. And I worked with an old friend of mine, Jay Fisher, who owns the company Cold Mountain Builders in Belfast, Maine, and another man, Daryl DeJoy, who's an expert in photovoltaic power. And we all devised a plan for restoration. And during the academic year 2008, 2009, a whole crew of folks worked on the buildings, put everything together, and the photovoltaic system was installed and we were all ready to go. So today we're going to talk about, I hope, a lot of the things that go on here. And I hope that it turns out to be an interesting and fun experience for all those who are observing. In addition to that, undoubtedly questions will come up. You may be able to get those in tonight. But if you cannot, you can email me always, and I'm happy to respond to any questions and offer any insights that I might at jtwomey@umassd.edu. Jerry and Ben both have my email address, so don't hesitate to follow this up with an email or a question. I'd be very happy to chat. So I guess we'll go right ahead now, Jerry. I think that's about it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, John. So what we're going to see now is as I said, a 5-minute slideshow, all photos of John's farm. Before we get underway with that, just want to remind you that if you have questions, by all means, you can submit them to the Q&A section of Zoom webinar. You will see the Q&A link down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. Interestingly enough. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this slideshow, and do pay attention on quite a few of the questions that I'll be asking John, and I think perhaps some that Ben will be asking John will really dovetail off of what you see here in this presentation. So let's get on with it.
No, I don't, Jamie.
Okay, well, there you have 5 minutes of John Twomey and Lee's Farm. John, you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone there? And so I've got two blocks of questions for John. First block is going to be about the farm specifically, and the second will be about perhaps some more personal takes on the on the Maine farm there. So let me begin by getting to my questions here. So John, the four seasons in Maine are quite distinct. Can you go ahead and describe them for us and how they might be different from what we know here down in the Boston South Coast area?
Sure. They are very distinct. And of course, I would say more marked than they are in the South Coast area. Winter starts earlier, lasts longer. The fall is more dramatic. The spring seems more dramatic in that you've been through a long winter and you're looking forward to things happening in the spring. And the summer, of course, is not overly warm, but it's a time of great abundance. The nice thing about the four seasons, or really substantially distinct four seasons in my view, that I've always enjoyed, is the fact that your lifestyle changes quite dramatically every 4 months, or every 3 months, sorry. In the spring, there's just so much to do in terms of getting ready for the planting season. There's a lot of pruning of apple trees to be done, planting of seedlings. We planted lettuce and kale seeds today. Making sure that the trout that have wintered over in the pond are in good shape. Just following up on all kinds of cleaning up of debris on the paths and trails around. Inevitably, there are blowdown trees that have to be cut up for firewood or just cut up and tossed into the woods. So there's lots to do in the spring. The summer is always a very active time of tending the garden and harvesting things as they come in throughout the entire summer and preserving many of those. I'd say probably 80 to 90% of our garden is for winter storage. So there's a lot of storage that happens toward the latter part of the summer, right on through the fall. The fall, of course, is very busy in terms of putting things away for the winter and bringing in firewood, which is a big project. And doing a lot of fishing as well, a lot of fishing in the spring as well. And then the winter, of course, is a lovely time. It's really the quiet time. You get to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor during the fall. And you get to enjoy the beautiful snowfalls that happen here. The ice that happens here is so wonderful not to have to drive out to work on a daily basis. And when it snows or there's a big ice storm, we just sit back and enjoy it. The winter's full of opportunities for tracking wildlife. There's an abundance of wildlife on the farm that include things such as white-tailed deer, coyotes, gray and red foxes, fishers, mink, ermine, wild turkeys, partridge, or what people generally call ruffed grouse. So we ski pretty much every day that there's snow available. On average, we ski or snowshoe, I would say 70 to 90 times per winter. And those are an hour to an hour and a half outings on a daily basis. So there's all of that. And on all of those outings, you get to see the tracks of the wild creatures. So the four distinct seasons make for four very different kinds of activities, all of which involve a good deal of physical movement. So it's a rather healthy lifestyle, and we can come back to that later on. And all of which involve a lot of mental activity in terms of either understanding something or solving some sort of an issue that has arisen. And there are endless numbers of issues that arise in this lifestyle. And we have the time, the resources and such to deal with those in a peaceful sort of fashion. So we sort of look forward to the challenges and look forward to figuring out how to handle X, Y, or Z issue that comes up. So it's a great lifestyle for those who like a lot of change. One might say, well, you live on an isolated farm at the end of a 1.5 mile long dirt road. How much variety or change can there be? Well, the fact of the matter is, if you observe carefully and just keep your eyes open and your ears open as well to bird song and such, there's an endless amount of stimulation and an endless amount of items to take on as projects and to keep you on the straight and narrow, keep you good and busy. Do it, Jerry.
Very good. Okay, so some of what's going to happen inevitably is that you're going to touch upon something that was going to be my next question. So we'll just have to kind of that. But given what we saw on the slides, it appears as though there's a tremendous amount of work to do on that farm, huge amount of work. So how do you manage it all?
Well, that's a very good question, and we're asked that question more often than one might imagine. The truth of the matter is, we don't hire anyone to help on anything. Lee and I tackle everything here on our own. And there's a lot to do, but as I mentioned earlier, those tasks or activities vary tremendously from season to season. So you're always gaining new skills. And I would say that the name of the game is to understand what has to be done, know when to do it, and then actually go out and do it. So we could take, for example, dealing with pests on apple trees. Well, there are times of the year when you deal with certain pests on apple trees. Apples are bothered by round-headed borers. They're bothered by voles that will chew the cambium layer off. They're bothered by porcupines that will climb up and chew off the branches. They're bothered by deer that will reach up and nip off the branches. And let's see, and they're also bothered by the yellow-bellied sapsucker, which will drill holes in the bark and suck the sap out of it and weaken the trees. That's one minor example. So you observe carefully what's happening and when it's happening, and then you have a strategy for dealing with it. I could elaborate the strategy for dealing with each of those issues, but that's true with so many things. There are pests in the garden. There are issues of habitat maintenance and improvement for native pollinators and wildlife. And each of those has a series of activities that need to be done in a timely fashion. So we just have made it our business to understand what those are, the issues that we want to deal with or need to deal with and want to deal with, and then to know what has to be done and then how to do it, and then we simply do it. The other factor that's not unimportant here is having very, very good equipment. Many times I will employ a tractor or a lawnmower. I have professional level John Deere riding lawnmowers, 2 tractors, a new John Deere tractor and an older Ford tractor, which was made in 1953. For tractor fanatics, it runs like a top. It's a wonderful little machine. Professional level chainsaws, professional level pole saws for trimming trees, professional level weed whackers with cutting blades. And I know how to operate all of those safely. And each of those tools used at the right time of year in the right situation maintains a lot of order. So there is a lot to do, but it's a matter of dividing and conquering. Truth be told, we probably don't work more than 2 or 3 hours a day, maybe 4 or 5 in a busy season. We have all kinds of leisure time. We have a couple of miles of trails all through the woods around the farm that we ski on and walk on. So there's just plenty of time for that sort of stuff, or to go fishing, or to take a ride into town, or all kinds of other things can be added on, or email friends and talk on the phone. We do all of that plenty as well. Does that help, Jerry?
Yes, thank you, John. You mentioned having free time and sometimes going to town. What is town? Who is town? What's your neighborhood like up there? What's your relationship to your neighbors like up there? What's the community? Tell us about it.
Okay. Well, most of our time we stay right here on the farm. We might leave every 7 to 10 days, not very often. The neighboring towns that we go to mostly would be along the coast, Belfast, Rockland, Camden, Rockport, and inland we go periodically to Augusta, Maine, or Waterville, Maine. We can also easily get to Bangor, which is about 55 miles away, or to Portland, which is about 85 miles away. We'll make a trip down to Portland once every 3 or 4 months, or when we're coming back from visiting relatives in Massachusetts to pick up supplies. But by and large, we're right here. Now, the town we live in is quite small. It has probably 1,000 inhabitants. It's a mix of traditional New Englanders who've been here for generations, and then there is a smattering of new people, a decent smattering of new people as well. And we get along with both of those groups very, very easily and very well. In fact, when I was first looking at this property and seriously considering buying it, I got to know my immediate neighbors, both of whom were born on the other side of what we call Hogback Mountain here. Charles Martin, or Mo Martin, and his brother Glenn Martin. And we were all about the same age, interestingly enough. And I was from a pretty rural background in Western Mass, as I told you earlier. So we just hit it off wonderfully. And the three of us, along with my distant neighbor down the road, 1.25 miles down the road, a retired professor from New York, we just got along wonderfully. And we're all dedicated to respecting wildlife, respecting the land, protecting the entire mountain. So we were all on the same page in that regard. And we and now their children all work together to maintain the quality of life that we all enjoy right here on the side of Hogback Mountain, the whole of Hogback Mountain for that matter. We're involved with the local land trust. A lot of the folks from away, so to speak, are involved in the land trust. And we work to improve wildlife habitat together, protect land together, and work on, Lee and I do a bluebird trail on some of their land. We put the houses out, we bring them in, monitor them, and so on. So there's a lot to do with people right in the immediate area, and periodically from time to time when we need something in town, or occasionally we'll go out just for lunch. But more often than not, it's so hard to beat those fantastically wonderful homegrown vegetables that we have lunch right here at home.
I can see that for sure.
You can follow up with any additional details you want, Jerry. Don't be hesitant.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll go to Ben and see what he's got in the Q&A queue there. So, John, you talked about the temptations of your own food, of your own homegrown and home preserved food. You do have, it looks like you have bountiful harvest there. What's the process for preparing that food, preserving that food? How does it get you through a winter?
Okay, that's a very good question. We raise all kinds of different vegetables. I won't enumerate them, it would take too long, but we use a number of different preservation techniques. One of the major ones is root cellar. We pack carrots, 50 pounds of carrots, 50 pounds of beets, 50 pounds of turnip, 50 pounds of parsnip, maybe 100 pounds of beautiful red cabbages into boxes and surround them with wood chips, and we place those in a root cellar. Now, placed in the root cellar, once that cools down nicely, all of those vegetables will keep until at least May or June of the following year. Just the other day, we took out a cabbage that was pristine, just beautiful. The same is true of all of the others. The other vegetable that we do preserve that way is daikon radish, which we like a lot in stir fries. Beyond the root cellar, then, we also hot water can a number of vegetables. And those would include things like tomatoes, They would include things like peaches. They would include things like pickled jalapenos. They would, a little visual aid. They would include things like pears. They would include things like tomatoes, which we have 3 large cupboards in the cellar. And those 3 cupboards hold, when full, and they're pretty much close to it now, they will hold 486 quarts of canned vegetables. So that's second. The third way we preserve things is via freezing. We have a 20 some odd cubic foot upright freezer in the cellar. And in that we freeze rhubarb for the whole winter, blueberries for the whole winter, kale for the whole winter, parsley for the whole winter, celery for the whole winter, Swiss chard for the whole winter, and likely some other things as well. Fish, of course, the trout and the other fish that we catch, we freeze those as well. So that freezer is absolutely packed at come fall. You can barely fit a blade of grass and a knife blade into there. Beyond that, we also dry things. We harvest a number of wild mushrooms. We go after principally the white oyster mushroom and the honeycap mushroom. And we know a good bit about those at this point. We know the safe ones. And we harvest those and then we dry those. So we have several gallons of dried mushrooms stored away that we put into soups and stir fries and so on and so forth. We also dry beans and peas. You noticed in one of the slides was of, I think, 2 gallons of dried beans. We raised 2 kinds of shell beans or storing beans. One's called the Portuguese dove breast bean, and the other's called the true red cranberry bean. We love those 2 beans because they're both large, they both cook at roughly the same rate. And wow, we add those to all kinds of things. The other morning, I mixed those with black turtle beans and made what I call John's Mexican style beans, and ooh la la, they're just fantastic. So those are our major approaches to storing things. Now, mind you, come June right through December, we won't eat a whole lot of stored food. So much fresh stuff will be coming into the garden: cilantro, broccoli rabe, lettuce, kale, that will zucchini, and so on, that we'll eat out of the garden on an almost continuous basis from mid-June right through the end of November, early December. Even when there's a little snow on the ground, we will cover our cold weather crops and continue to eat those out of the garden, putting off the time that we have to tackle all of our stored food. We're sort of very frugal, and so we inevitably put up more than we need, but better more than we need than not enough.
Okay, very good. Ben, kick it over to you, and let's see what's happening in the world of Q&A there.
Well, Jerry, we have a very active Q&A board, so, and I'm just going to ask these as they came in. This is actually from, and this is old school day for you, John, I'm sure, with some of these names, but Memory Holloway.
Oh, yeah.
Is wondering what kind of organic material you use to improve soil health and cover crops.
Okay.
And how often you test soil.
Well, answer the last part first. We haven't tested the soil. We can tell, and perhaps we should, but we can tell by the appearance of the vegetables and the taste of the vegetables that they're doing exceptionally well. We don't plant any cover crops on the garden per se. What we do is we continuously add organic matter. And there is a number of kinds of organic matter that we add to the soil. You can't see the field, but I'm looking at it. There's about a 6-acre field around the garden. So I mow that entire field as well as other part of another field every year around the end of August, early September. And I have a rake that I drag on the back of another tractor. And I rake up all that hay and put it in piles all around the garden. And as we close the garden down, or as the garden is put to bed, as we harvest the crops out of the garden, we pile that mulch on, that hay mulch on the garden. So that at the end of November, the entire garden is covered with at least 8 to 12 inches of organic hay from the fields in the area. In addition to that, to ensure that there's an abundance of minerals, we apply a great deal of shells from the seashore and seaweed from the seashore to the garden, all that we can get. And I'll be frank with you, we can get quite a lot. Beyond that, we also take all of the wood ash from the 5 cords of firewood that we burn each year, and all of that wood ash gets put on the garden as well. As we know, trees growing in different areas have different minerals within them. And when you burn that, the minerals remain in the wood ash. So spreading that over the garden, we also spread a good deal of that around the apple trees and pear trees and peach trees. Beyond that, I add a little bit of a product called azomite, which comes from Utah. It's rich in a number of minerals, organic product, a little bit of that, not a whole lot. We feed our chickens a strictly organic feed. And of course, we free range the chickens as often as we possibly can. Consequently, their manure is organic and it's full of the good things that were in the organic feed. And it's full of the good things that were in the bugs and grasses and such that they find around the farm. In addition to that, the bedding that we use in the chicken coop is all grass that we have mowed and dried and kept for chicken bedding. So we 2 or 3 times a year, we haul all of that chicken bedding and manure up to the garden and spread that over the entire garden. So we're always adding organic matter. And in all honesty, it's pretty stunning. The garden soil at this point, it's a testament to the amount that's been put in it. It's 12 to 18 inches higher than the soil in the field surrounding the garden. So it's a dynamite garden place, I must say. And one need only look at the vegetables and taste the vegetables. The flavor of these vegetables is absolutely stunning. One time, my grandson, Calvin, was here, and I had made him a lunch, and it included a number of vegetables. And he's a bright kid, a lively kid. And he took one bite of the vegetables, or 2 or 3 bites. He said, "Oh my God, Granddad, these vegetables taste like no other vegetable I've ever had. They're absolutely fantastic. You can taste the goodness in it." I've often thought to myself that humans have a capacity to taste the goodness of something. You might think back to a grandmother's stew or a grandfather's stew that you had one time, and it just struck a certain chord with you. You could feel the wonder in that soup or stew. And I think there is that capacity somewhere, a vestige in the human nasal passage or somewhere that allows you to evaluate the quality of the food. Wildlife, of course, have this. Deer will often feed right below the garden where the nutrients from the garden have leached into the field. They'll come right to that and prefer that over many other places. So in time, I may do the test, but I'm not terribly concerned about it. So far, so good. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And John, a follow-up question too, with the straw that you use for mulching, this is memory still, do you have like a root stack? Do you have rodent problems because of that?
Good question. The answer to that is YES. And the rodent that is the biggest pain in the neck is a little tiny thing. It's a sweet looking little critter called the VOLE, not MOLE, mole, but VOLE, vole. And they do love any habit, any mulch or any leaf matter or logs even that they can get under. So we know the foods that they prefer, and they prefer beets and they prefer carrots. They will periodically bother potatoes a little bit, but not to the extent that it really bothers us. So we've devised a system of this about, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. We were struggling with this issue. And there are many, many issues like this in the garden, be they potato beetles or cabbage looper worms, all of which we can tell you about how we deal with. But anyway, back to the holes. So we got a 36-inch wide hardware cloth, which is half-inch wide mesh. And we surround our chicken coop with that, so no mice or predators will get in and bother the chickens as well. But anyway, back to the garden. So we cut that in half, and then we dig a trench around the entire area where we're going to plant beets and carrots, which are the favorites of these little critters. And we dig it down about 6 inches and surround the entire patch of beets and carrots with that. And we will occasionally get a little bit of damage on that, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 beets or carrots bothered a little bit, but it's pretty much revolutionized the situation and solved the vole problem. So they are out there. They're almost impossible to eliminate. So it's a matter of working with them, living with them, and figuring out how to best manage the threat that they represent. And that's true of so many other things too. I mentioned the yellow-bellied sapsucker on the apple tree, or deer, or woodchucks, you name it. There are plenty of things out there. And this is part of the wonder of this life. You always have to be observing carefully, and you always have to be calculating and outwitting really these very able and clever insects and critters that would just as soon eat your lunch.
That's great. And this is a question from Susan Krumholtz, and just saying that was magnificent. And she has a question that goes back to your UMass Dartmouth days, and her recollection is you were putting out nesting boxes.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
A sparrow, and she's wondering what that sparrow was.
All right. It, in fact, exactly was not a sparrow. In fact, sparrows were the enemy. The nest boxes that I had the whole trail on campus were the same nest boxes the same style nest box that we have here. And if anyone's interested in the plans for that, just email me and I'll send you a whole blurb on our bluebird nesting projects up here in Maine. We do bluebird nesting workshops in a variety of places in Maine. We helped put up over 225 or 230 bluebird boxes all in the mid-coast of Maine. But anyway, on campus, I got the okay from the beautification committee to put up boxes on metal poles. And I did that, and the boxes were aimed principally at bluebirds, but also tree swallows. The campus is broad and open, and excellent habitat for bluebirds and tree swallows. And lo and behold, as soon as we I put the houses up, they were occupied by both bluebirds and tree swallows, mainly by tree swallows. Now, on campus, as the years went on and the dorms expanded, there were more and more students and more food left around for a bird that's called the English sparrow, or the house sparrow, to thrive. Now, it's not a native to the US. It's a imported bird. Someone thought that it would be great to have all of the birds mentioned in the works of Shakespeare in the US. So they brought some of these English sparrows together with another major enemy of native cavity nesting birds, the starling, to the US and released them somewhere in New York, I guess. Now they're in all 48 lower states, both of these birds. But the house sparrow can get into the same size hole, an 1.5 inch hole, that you have on the bluebird box and the tree swallow box. And so we divide, and they don't migrate, they don't go south, which the tree swallows and to some extent the bluebirds do. So I devised a system of placing what I call a reducer on the front of the nest boxes, which brought the hole down to a 1-inch size, which the English sparrows could not get in. So in early March and such, they would try to get in those boxes and then they couldn't get in. And they became discouraged. And so once the tree swallows and bluebirds came back, I would take those reducers off and they could then take the houses. I kept those operating for a few years after leaving UMass Dartmouth, but then it just became too much. And I was hoping that the green navigators might take over that project, but somehow that just kind of never got going. So here on the farm now, we have 8 or 10 bluebird boxes. And mind you, those bluebird boxes, if you should get the plans, they work wonderfully for these birds. The bluebird, the tree swallow, the chickadee, the black-capped chickadee, which is the state bird of both Massachusetts and Maine. Also the tufted titmouse and the wonderful little house wren, which you have down there in Mass. We don't get it out here on the farm, but it's one of my favorite birds. So the box model that we have works for all of those. And I hope that answers your question, Susan. And how kind of you to remember that project with the birds. It was so enjoyable to walk around, and many students took photos of those birds and truly enjoyed it. Became a little connected to birds via that process. One student in particular comes to mind who actually went into ecology work, and she's done great stuff. Cat Rubin. Okay, sorry.
All right, and this question is from Ben Bauman.
Okay, Ben.
And he's wondering to what extent, well, first of all, he says hello, and he enjoys your email updates. But wondering to what extent, if any, climate change has affected life on the farm.
Well, in all honesty, it seems as if the winters are a little less severe than they were in the first few years I was here. We are seeing in this area now mockingbirds and cardinals, which were not here 20 or so years ago, 30 years ago. Beyond that, I can't definitively point to specific items that I see changing. I think those things change relatively slowly, but from what I read, they are definitely happening on a broad scale, as we all know. But the only two items that I've noticed really are the presence of, well, also the tufted titmouse was not in this area 25, 30 years ago. So those three birds, the mockingbird, the cardinal, and the tufted titmouse are all here now. And that is likely as not the result of a warming climate. Beyond that, while I observe things on a daily basis, I don't see there's the changes that I'm seeing are not dramatic enough. Of course, we're talking about a period of only 25 or 30 years, actually 40 years that I've been coming up here. But that's all I can say on that, Ben. I'm sorry I don't have more details to offer you. Maybe in time I will. And should something come up, I know where to reach you, Ben Bauman, and I'll get right to you.
That's great. This question is from Tom Mulvey.
Oh, Tom Mulvey. Oh, great.
Tom Mulvey. Well done, John. Living your dream.
Trying to.
And any encounters with bears?
Any what?
Any encounters with bears?
Well, it's interesting, Tom. That's a good question. When I first came here back in 1978, it was the spring of 1979. I stepped outside the old farmhouse and crossed the driveway, and I looked down the road coming in, and I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and a bear ambled out of the woods. Amazingly, it stood up on its hind legs in the middle of the road, and it dropped down to all fours and crossed the road. And I thought to myself, well, isn't this fantastic? I'm going to see bears regularly here now. And Tom, I have not seen one since 1978. And I discussed this with the neighbors that I mentioned some time ago, Mo and Glenn, and neither of them have seen a bear on this mountain, and they were born on this mountain. Now, periodically, I will get word of a bear crossing a road within a mile or 2 or 3 of my place. But so far, sadly, I'm not seeing a lot of bears. I would like to. I know they can be a nuisance to some degree. They can bother chicken coops. They can bother beehives, which would annoy Ben, I know. But so far, they simply haven't. They aren't here. They are here, but they aren't here in the numbers that they're highly visible. They are hunted in Maine, and pretty relentlessly so. So they are, I think, shyer than they are in parts of Western Mass, for example. I have some relatives in Western Mass in fairly populated towns, and they're saying that people are seeing bears come into the villages and come into dumpsters and so on. And it's conceivable that the hunting activity in Maine keeps them a little more nervous and on their toes and shy than elsewhere. So I look forward to seeing more bears, and I'm hoping to learn from Ben how to successfully manage honeybees. And I'm hoping not to, should I get into that, I'm hoping that I won't have bears following up on that. Thank you very much, Tom. Good to hear from you. We okay there?
Yes. And this is a question from Tom Pertwick. And he's curious, when you moved to Maine to live deliberately, what did you find you missed most about life on the South Coast, food-wise or other? And what didn't you miss?
Very good question. Well, I didn't miss the suburban lifestyle that I had, although I had a rather nice little rural property in Mass. What I probably miss most is the incredible students that we had at UMass Dartmouth. Teaching and being involved in the teaching learning process was hugely rewarding to me. I realized that at my core, I'm a bit of a nurturing person. I like to help people do things and grow and develop and maximize their potential. And so I do miss that teaching learning process. I miss also the fantastic interactions that I had with so many colleagues in the halls and at meetings and so on at UMass Dartmouth. All of that was tremendously rewarding and a great deal of fun. Do I miss the committee work? A little less so, I guess, but a little bit to some degree. But what I did, I think, in retrospect, I realized that that need I have to sort of care for things and nurture to some extent is a big part of life here. Here, I'm regularly nurturing a flock of chickens, a pond full of brook trout, all of the wildlife that surrounds this area. I'm working hard to make the place appealing to and a great home for them. Nurturing the several hundred apple trees that I have here, the 12 or 15 pear trees, peach trees, and of course the garden. All of that satisfies, it seems, that nurturing need within me. But that said, events like this are very satisfying to me as well. I've given a number of talks at libraries around Maine and in other New England states, and I find that very enjoyable. Sort of takes me back to the teaching learning days, which I so enjoyed. As far as other things in that area, I really do miss the wonderful ethnic foods that are available down there. And so twice a year, we make a trip down in the fall and in the spring, in the pre-COVID times, of course. And we love the Portuguese foods. And so we stop by the great grocery store, Chaves on Columbia Street, or Portugalia, right in the center of Fall River. And I lived, as some of you know, for a year in Portugal, studied at the University of Lisbon, and came to really be fond of Portuguese food, Portuguese culture, and of course the Portuguese people. So to go down and revisit those places and pick up a bunch of good Portuguese olive oil and dried cod, the famous bacalhau. We make a number of meals out of those. We make kale soup, which we absolutely adore. And I like too to stop by the Lebanese bakery, Sam's Bakery. We love their pie, their meat pies and spinach pies and so on. And we like also to stop at the Dow Market, which is a Middle Eastern shop in Fall River, and pick up olives and so on there. And of course, we never fail to visit the famous restaurant Antonio's in downtown New Bedford, where inevitably I always get the sardinhas asadas, the grilled sardines, which I totally adore. So we miss those things a lot. Not having that ethnic variety around, we do miss that. And the opportunity to speak Portuguese or Spanish just about as often as one like, I miss that as well. But there are other things that compensate. And of course, the 2 trips down per year make up for that. And they help out an awful lot. Feel free to follow up with additional questions if you'd like.
Yeah, John, I'm going to ask one more question and then turn this back over to Jerry.
Okay.
But with all your orchard fruits and bush fruits, how do you handle pollination? What have you done to make sure that there's adequate pollination there?
Very good question. I have considered getting honeybees to help on pollination, but I've been a little reluctant to do that given the number of issues that are involved in raising them. And of course, since working on this project with Ben, I've learned that Ben has 4 hives and is quite successful at it. So I'm hoping to maintain this relationship and learn a whole deal from Ben about how to raise honeybees successfully. But at this point, I depend entirely on the native pollinators. And those include principally the several varieties, a number of varieties of bumblebees and mason bees, principally the blue orchard bee, that to pollinate the berries and the apples and pears and so on. Those bees do a wonderful job, and we always wind up with an abundance of fruit, more than we can possibly consume in a summer or a year or 10 years for that matter. And what we like about those bees is that they will come out and work when it's 45 degrees, and they'll come out and work when it's rainy as well or drizzly as well. Honeybees are a little fussier. So since we get a lot of that cold, damp weather here in Maine in the spring, we rely heavily on those bees. And believe me, they and a number of other kinds of small bees, we call them little ant bees, they're just as active as can be. Now, to enhance things for them, since they do so much for us, I try to create habitat for them. And the habitat for the bumblebee includes, I have several miles of, at least 2 or 3 miles of stone walls on the property. Bumblebees like to nest in holes or crevices. So I maintain those stone walls moderately open so the bumblebees can get into them. Also, they like to nest in brush piles. So I make brush piles in places where they can sneak in and nest. As far as the orchard bees or the mason bees, I don't take any dead trees off the land. In fact, sometimes I girdle trees, about 1 or 2 per acre of woodland, and insects borers will make holes in those downed trees or in those dead trees. And they leave a hole in the tree when they exit it. The borer exits the tree, they leave a hole in the tree. And those holes then become homes for the mason bees to lay their eggs. And it's amazing. I was just out skiing the other day and I passed by a dead white pine. And looking at it, I saw a number of holes, and a number of those holes, upon careful examination, were packed with mud. So inside that hole were a dozen or two eggs of a blue orchard bee or a mason bee, and then it was stuffed with mud at the end. So come spring, those little bees will bore out of there and they'll be ready to go as soon as the trees are flowering and the blueberries are flowering. So at this point, they do a more than adequate job. That said, I would love to have some honey, and I'd love to tend or nurture a hive of honeybees. It would be great fun. And I have every inclination to believe that Ben is going to put me on the right path to be able to successfully raise honeybees here. So thank you so much. Is that good then?
All right. And Jerry, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. We've got still a bunch of questions that you folks have asked that we should get to.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask John one question, and then I will go to the Q&A and ask John your questions. So John, my question to you is that given that the English and Communication Department co-sponsored this event, talk a little bit about literature that if you had to put together perhaps a short reading list, or if we looked at your shelves, what would we see on your shelves, on your bookshelves?
All right. Well, I guess a good way to approach it would be what were some of the works that were influential in me. Now, I'd say first and foremost, there's an old saying, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. And I heard all kinds of stories as a young boy about my grandmother, my great-grandmother, who had a small farm in Roxbury, Connecticut, and about the flock of chickens that she had and the cows she had and the fruit tree she had. And those were always told in sort of a romantic and appealing fashion. So I had that sort of orientation as a youngster to be fond of a rural kind of lifestyle. In addition, living in a rural environment as a boy, I saw a lot of farmers at work, and I saw their relationship to their land and their animals and their plants and so on. So I had that sort of a leaning to begin with. But as I went on in life, of course, my field of study was Spanish and Latin American literature. And within those two groups of literature, there were a number of writers who had an impact on me. And they include people like Andrés Bello, his work, Silva, la Agricultura Latinoamericana, in which he lauds or talks wonderfully about the wonders of agriculture in the Americas. There was another fellow named Sarmiento from Argentina, and he had a work called The Hogar Paterno. And that moved me quite a lot because he talked so fondly about the efficiency of his mother's farm, a very simple little rural place in Argentina, and the organization of it and so on. And I developed many images of that and found that very moving. I could say too, Carlos Castaneda, his famous book, Journey to Ixtlan, had an impact on me when the Yaqui sorcerer tells to the, Don Juan tells to the apprentice, you can take any path in life, the one that goes over the hill, down by the river, around by the bend, choose one that has heart, because they all lead nowhere. So that had an influence on me in terms of choosing a path in life beyond teaching, of course, which had a lot of heart for me, a path that has heart. And this lifestyle certainly does have heart for me. Beyond that, so a lot of those folks had an influence, and there are a few others from that group of literature, but the works of Gene Logsdon, Logsdon, had a big impact on me. His talks a great deal about the wonders of farming and then the how-to of a number of things. He passed away not long ago, but he has a number of works, and they're all very wonderful. Wendell Berry as well, his comments on rural life and the values of rural life helped to push me along in this direction. Does that help, John?
Yes, thank you very much, John. Thank you. Okay, so let me go back to the Q&A section here. This is from Joe Barrett. My wife and I were students of Dr. Twomey from 1978 to 1982 and remember him being an early advocate of water safety and purity. Can he talk about his current drinking water situation?
Yes, I can. Joe Barrett, great to hear from you. I remember you very, very fondly. Wonderful student with a lot of spunk, which I'm sure you still have, Joe. Yeah, water is of course critical. This side of Hogback Mountain has abundant water. Interestingly enough, people will ask me, how often do you have to water your garden? Well, the fact of the matter is I have never watered the garden. The groundwater is great here. And of course, the mulch, the heavy mulch, protects the garden from drying out. But as far as water for the home place per se, so I never watered the garden at all. The ponds are all spring fed. I have 2 ponds, they're spring fed, and they may go down a foot or 2 feet or 3 feet even on a really dry summer, but they always hold water wonderfully. So there's a lot of groundwater to be had here. The old timers here, the original folks, the Howards, have a dug well in the cellar. So the cellar is at least 10 feet high. It's a really ample cellar. And then at the bottom of the floor, under the kitchen, there's a dug well that has stone all around it. And they had, and I had this for years as well, a hand pump in the kitchen that went down to that dug well, and they would pump up water from there. And so did I for years. In the process of getting water, getting the place restored 2008, 2009, we had a company come in and put in a drilled well or an artesian well that goes down 240 feet. And I just had to replace the pump this year. It was hit by electricity, by lightning, sorry. And when we pulled it out, which was quite a process, I mean, the guy did the whole thing, but and he did a wonderful job. It turned out it was at the height of a dry summer, and the well goes down 240 feet, but there was water at 40 feet. So he said to me, "My God, you're in an ideal situation here. You'll never have a water issue if you've got that much water at this time of year." So at this point, the entire house runs on water from the artesian well or the drilled well. Does that cover it, Joey? I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Yeah, this is from Adnan El Nassan. The small pond on the farm or the ocean?
Yes, 2 small ponds. There were not any ponds here when I first came. So I think it was around 1984. I had this great guy, his name is Brub Lucas, he's passed away now, had a wonderful excavating company, and he had put in a number of ponds. And at that point, I had a friend who was an expert in water, a hydrologist, and he and Mr. Lucas went over the farm and located 2 locations where they knew there would be good groundwater. They could tell by the grass and the lay of the land. And so Mr. Lucas brought in 2 huge bulldozers and plowed and plowed and plowed for days and dug 2 ponds. One's about an acre, the other's about half an acre maybe, and they're 19 feet deep. So we swim in the larger pond, and every fall I have about 100 or so brook trout delivered, and we put those into the ponds. Both more in the larger or upper pond than in the smaller pond, and they winter over, and then they feed on insects in the spring, and then we catch them out at the end of May, early June. And by spending 8 or 9 months in the ponds like that, they are almost native quality, which make for excellent table fare. And me and I both fish them avidly. And within a week or two, we catch the lion's share, clean them immediately, and within 15 or 20 minutes, they're in the deep freezer down cellar for consumption throughout the winter months. Does that cover it?
Sounds like it, for sure. Okay, this is Maine. Do you focus on heirloom vegetables to preserve dwindling seed varieties?
I would say not tremendously on heirloom vegetables. We could, but we simply choose the varieties that produce a hell of a lot of food and that grow well in this climate. We have two companies nearby. One's called Johnny's Selected Seeds and the other called Fedco. And they both produce seeds and root crops that do well in cold climates. They're within 20 miles of the house here. And so we simply select varieties that do very well in our conditions and that produce heavily. And so we stick strictly with what works. I would say, as far as heirloom per se, probably the two heirloom items that we do grow are the beans. The true red cranberry bean, which was raised by the Abenaki Indians in this area before the Europeans got here. And we also raised the Portuguese dove breastings called papa de rolo. And that is also an heirloom bean. Beyond that, and those just happen to produce abundantly, and they're wonderful beans. Beyond that, we don't distinguish much. We're looking for quantity and quality, and with regard to the garden. Now, on the other hand, on the apple trees, as I mentioned, there are several hundred wild apples and non-wild apples on the farm. And for the past 15 years or so, I've been grafting heirloom apples onto wild apple rootstock. And I'll graft onto older trees or younger trees. And I've grafted onto at least 100 different trees at this point. And another visual aid, these little sticks are scions that I cut off of a tree recently. And it's exactly this little scion that you would graft onto a wild apple tree rootstock using one of three grafts, either the cleft graft, the bark graft, or the whip and tongue graft. And this is a wax that you secure the grafts on. It's called Gaschel's grafting wax. And this is my little grafting knife, which is a beveled knife, just one side is sharpened. And so every spring from between April 29th and May 10th, we go out with ladders and crawl up the trees and graft on using one of those three grafts. In the last, I'd say 3 weeks ago, we went out to all of our trees and we cut scions from at least 30 different heirloom varieties, and we will be grafting those onto additional trees. So far, we have 85 different heirloom varieties growing on the farm of apples. These are ancient varieties that evolved natively, wildly, right here in New England and beyond, other parts of the country also. They make for fantastic eating. And this year, we probably had apples from at least 25 different heirloom varieties. And that number will simply increase exponentially as the trees get larger and the grafts become the dominant factor on the trees, and we eliminate the other branches that we don't want on that tree. So we are all over heirloom apples, but as far as vegetables, a little less so. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I'm going to graft two questions into one here. So this is from Shirley Dufresne and Jamie Nielsen.
Oh, my friend Shirley.
Shirley asks, protein, fish, beans, eggs, any meat? And Jamie asks, first says, you are very insightful. Do you raise any animals on your farm?
Well, yes. What was the first part on protein?
Protein, fish, beans, eggs, any meat?
Okay. Yeah, the answer is we do raise chickens. We raise a flock of, and you saw some of those in the photo earlier. We used to raise a variety called the Golden Campine, which we're both extremely enamored of. But we found a variety that's a little more manageable, a little friendlier, a little easier to manage. And manageability matters a whole lot on a farm like this. So we raise about 12 or 15 chickens every few years, and we winter over 4 or 5 hens and 1 rooster. So we have abundant eggs, which we eat with some regularity. And periodically we will put 8, 10, 12 chickens in the freezer. And we use those mainly in making soups throughout the winter. And if you stew a chicken on the wood stove, which we'll do in the winter, for a number of hours, it becomes very tender. And then add a lot of vegetables and grains and beans to that, you come out with a huge pot of stew. So that one chicken then becomes meat protein for maybe a half a dozen to 7 or 8 meals. And we'll break that up and freeze those. In addition, of course, we raise the brook trout, which we freeze for the winter. We also like to go fishing. We fish in local ponds for a fish called bass or sometimes pickerel. And we like to get out of the coast occasionally and fish for a seasonal fish that comes in here in Maine and in Mass as well, the mackerel. It's a strong tasting, oily fish, but it's high in omega-3s. We like the flavor, so we catch a bunch of those and freeze those as well for the winter. That's our major meat or egg protein. We also, of course, make a significant number of our meals are vegetarian, in which we mix a variety of beans or peas and grains, be it barley or rice or millet or cornmeal for that matter. We'll mix those back and forth. We make a wide number of Indian meals and Thai meals that include those ways of achieving pure, complete protein via the beans and the grains. I hope that answers your question, Shirley. Any more, just follow right up.
Okay, we have a few more, so let's see if we can get through them. This is from Suzanne Pelletier. Thanks for doing this. The slideshow was wonderful. My question is about the bluebird hole reducers. A square piece of wood with the hole 1 quarter smaller and then nailed over the original entry. I think I have seen such pieces of wood added to the front of the houses. I have a constant battle going on with the house sparrows. They won last summer.
Yeah, they're relentless. The only system I have found is that concept I mentioned earlier of the reducer. And the best way to make that, Suzanne, and hi, Suzanne, by the way, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Is to take a shingle, a white cedar shingle, and a drill with a 1-inch bit. And cut the shingle off so it's about 4 inches long and 3 inches wide. Drill a 1-inch hole through that. And then with a screw, a Phillips head screw, hold it over the 1.5-inch hole on your bird box and screw it, just 1 screw above it, so that you can take it off easily if bluebirds show up. That will discourage the house sparrows because they're there early, February, March. They're probably looking for housing in your area. And they will, unless there are just tons and tons and tons around, which there could be. I mean, they're overwhelming in neighborhoods. But that's the only way I think that you're likely to be able to fend them off. The problem with them is that I actually witnessed one case in which a tree swallow had taken a nest. This was at UMass Dartmouth, over near the track. I had a house over there near the power plant and the police station. And a tree swallow had taken that nest and she laid eggs in there. And a male house sparrow went in there and killed and decapitated her. So they are a formidable foe for both tree swallows and bluebirds. So my only recommendation would be to try the reducer and put it on early and leave it on as late as you can until you see the other birds, the bluebirds or the tree swallow show up, and then take it off. At that point, it's possible that the house sparrows will have found other accommodations and give your and our native birds a break. It's a noble mission you have there, Suzanne. I wish you luck. Fortunately, here on the farm, we don't have the house sparrow, nor do we have the starlings. They are in this area, but fortunately, they don't come out here to this remote location. They like to be more around feed pens and places where animals are raised on moss. And so we see them nearby, but thank goodness we haven't had to deal with them here so far. I hope that helps.
And this is also from Suzanne. Which type of fruit trees do the best without chemical spray?
Probably the peach and then the pear. We don't spray anything. I've never used a pesticide or a herbicide on this property since 1978, nor have I removed any organic matter from the property since 1978. I keep all of the organic matter, treetops, grass, mowings from the fields, everything stays here to enrich the soil more. But as far as pesticides are concerned, we don't use any, but the most bug-free products we have as far as fruits are concerned would be first the peach, probably the blueberry as well. The pear is quite bug-free. Apples probably have the biggest problem. However, we will get a percentage, let's say 30% on it. It would vary from year to year, but we might get 30 to 40% almost perfect apples. And then we'll get a bunch that are bothered a little bit, and we'll just cut out the bad spot. As I often say, I'd much rather find an apple that can support a worm than an apple that's so coated with pesticides that it cannot support a worm. So we just take it upon ourselves to work with them the best we can. And of course, to plant plenty of pear and peach trees. And of course, blueberries grow wild here. We have 8 or so acres of blueberries that come in every other year. There's a whole mowing pattern that I use on those to assure that we have blueberries every year, which I can explain in detail if anyone's interested.
Okay, so we're basically out of time now, but John, there are just are 2 quick ones. So if we get through these,
Yeah.
people can get on. That would be great. So, question from Lori Quinn. You've worked hard to preserve this farm. Is your family interested in doing the same for future generations? We have 112 acres of raw land mountain in New Hampshire, which we are trying to preserve for the next generation that has not developed into a subdivision. There is no guarantee, though, the next generation will not want to sell when we are gone.
Yeah, that's a good question, and always a perplexing item for older folks who have property that they love very much. I would say this, my children and grandchildren have a profound fondness for this place. And my long-term plan is to work with them as well as the local land trust. I'm a member of this local land trust, and all of my land abuts land trust land. And so I'm working with them and a couple of other folks to develop a plan so that the place will never be developed and that will limit future construction on it. I have a little family graveyard here, and Lee and I intend to be buried there. And it looks right down on the house. So while they say it's difficult, if not impossible, to reach from the grave, I'm hoping to do that by simply my presence there and setting it up so that the future generations in my family can take advantage of and enjoy the property, love it as I have, and that the land trust have some role in that, which we're working on at this point. I'm pretty confident that something good will come out of it, but I do understand your concern there, and I hear that from a number of people who have older farms or properties that they are extremely fond of and that want to want to maintain them. That certainly is my desire and my hope and dream as well.
Okay, and this is a message from I believe it says it's from Cynthia Yokin, but it's signed Mel. Anyway, hi John, no question, but just a comment. Cindy and I are so proud of what you are accomplishing in Maine. Of course, we've been there a few times and seen in person your amazing farm. By and by, send our regards to your chickens who have become, over the years, our good friends. Abrazos, Mel.
Abrazos, Mel. Thank you. Joe Barrett just asked about email address. I saw a little blurb come at the bottom of the screen. I have this, Joe. I hope you can read it. It's jtwomey@umassd.edu. Okay, Joey, I hope that does it. I hope you and Liz are very, very well, and I'm sure you are.
Okay, so we are done with our webinar here. Thanks to my co-host Ben Jones. Thank you, John Twomey, for your very illuminating and illustrious telling of tales about your Maine farm there. And thank you, participants, all of you who showed up.
Thank you all for coming. We really, really appreciate the opportunity. It's so great to hear from so many folks that I knew in that earlier wonderful UMass Dartmouth life. And please, anyone who has a question or follow-up or question unrelated to the things we've talked about today, just email me. Send a phone number as well. I'll call you. We can chat, and I'd be happy to share anything that I've discovered over the years. Thanks again. Really a great time.